Morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Isle of Wight Pension Fund Committee. And also a special welcome to all of our guests who are here in the public gallery. We do have a couple of issues to read out before we get going, which is our fire procedure. In case of emergency, there are no planned fire drills during the meeting. If you hear the fire alarm, please treat it as real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest safe escape route is the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber, or indeed the public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. Lifts cannot be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it is safe to do so by a member of staff. Thank you for that. First item then on our agenda today is apologies and any substitutions. We've not been notified of any. We heard from Warren. Right. We'll look forward to his company when he can join us. I have been notified that Chris Warren is not able to join us today. I was notified of that yesterday. I was also notified yesterday that Terry Hubbleday is likewise going to be able to join us today. Did try and find out what legal representative we have. The good news is I can see online Francis Fernandez is there. Can you hear us all right, Francis?
Yes, I'm Chair. I can hear you fine. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you. Second item then is the minutes of the last meeting. You've all received a copy of those minutes which have been distributed. Are there any comments on those minutes? I just have one small correction to make, which was under the declarations of interest. Just to be precise, it says Councillor C. Jarman declared as an interest he was a member of the Isle of Wight Jewish Society as his wife was Jewish. Not actually a member because she's Jewish, but both myself and my wife are members of the Jewish Society, and my wife to that. I'm not, but she's both members. So with that correction, are we content to approve the minutes? I'll close them. I'll look for second that. Councillor Churchman, everybody in favour? That's passed unanimously. Next item then is declarations of interest, and I'll start off by making exactly the same one as I just did now. Are there any other declarations of interest? Bearing in mind it's only members that need declarations of interest. There are none. Next one then is public question time. We did receive 3 advanced written questions. Not hugely advanced, but advanced all the same. And I did accept the questions that were slightly close to the line, the cut-off line. So I'm going to go through those now. They're numbered 56, 57, and 58. So 56, first of all. There are a written question from Sam Pascoe to myself, Councillor Chris Jarman, is with reference to item 12, minutes Pension Fund Committee 29, July 25, motion from Councillor Jarman in the interests of transparency. I would ask the Pension Fund Committee to share details surrounding the attainment of the additional legal advice as discussed at the committee meeting 27/25. Which ultimately meant that the proposed motion could not be considered at that meeting. This includes the reasons that additional legal advice was sought and by whom, given the legal advice had already been considered by the committee, the date when the legal advice was sought and received, and why this was not done in good time for officers to digest and then provide advice to the committee on or before 29/7/25, so that the proposed motion could be properly considered at the Pension Fund Committee meeting on. And if permitted, a supplementary question, will that legal advice be made public, or if not, why not? And the response which was drafted, I have to say, very well by Steve Harrison, our pension fund manager, which I did edit. In fact, I edited all of these before they were released, is legal advice specific to the motion from Councillor Jarman to the Isle of Wight Pension Fund Committee of the 29th of July 25 regarding the Palestine-Israel conflict had not been sought previously. Earlier legal, regulatory and investment advice provided to the Isle of Wight Pension Fund Committee was generic to the conflict and to the topic of divestment. The Isle of Wight Pension Fund Committee are required to take proper advice on all matters that may impact investments. On publication of the agenda and papers for the 29th of July 25 meeting, the Strategic Manager Pensions therefore sought legal advice and other investment advice specific to Councillor Jarman's motion. The pension sector is heavily regulated to ensure pension members' interests are protected. The prime duty is a fiduciary one to ensure returns can be achieved to make pension payments. The legal and investment advice could not be sought until the motion was finalised, published 1 week prior to the meeting. The legal advice in draft form only arrived on the morning of the committee meeting, leaving insufficient time for officers to review and consider the advice. The legal advice has been received as confidential and legally privileged. This matter was raised at the last meeting by Councillor Drew and others, and cannot therefore be released publicly without waiver of those conditions. So that's the first one. I should ask if the individual is here with us today, Mr. Pascoe. Mrs. Pascoe, not there, right? So the second one is from Marilyn Barrett. See if Marilyn is here with us today. And would you like to read out your motion, or would you like me to do it for you, Marilyn? I'll leave the choice to you entirely. Happily to. This is question 57. Councillor Jarman's reasonably worded motion, agenda item 11 on the 3rd of September 2025, proposing fund managers simply consider the advice and rulings of the International Court of Justice, as well as the Rome Statute, which is incorporated into UK law, would, if passed, be a small step towards fulfilling the committee's fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of local government pension scheme members. Fiduciary deriving from the word fidere, to trust. Thank you for the Latin. The trust bit, while carrying out their primary purpose. The legislative statutory funding objective, to hold assets to cover their technical provisions to pay the pensions, the money bit. As is widely evidenced in the public domain, local government pension scheme members have clearly expressed that their interests lie in adherence to international law and efforts towards stopping the persecution and slaughter of innocent lives. This is a purely humanitarian and ethical standpoint, and in no way a political standpoint. It is considerable, unconscionable. There should be any objection, therefore, please will the committee explain how this proposed motion violates current legislative UK law or TPR regulations, provide a detailed list of each perceived violation with its specific numbered reference and description. So although the motion was addressed to me, it does reference the committee. So although I'll give my response, I'll then turn to the committee under our nice democratic system and offer them if they would like to add anything to that. My response is the motion proposed by Councillor Jarman will be the subject of a report and advice from officers on the day. The advice provided to members of the Isle of Wight Pension Fund Committee will incorporate legal, regulatory and investment advice received. The pension sector is for good reason heavily regulated, and the committee has a duty to take proper advice before deciding on matters that may influence fund investments. Based on national advice received from a KC on this matter, there is no question of the local government pension schemes engaging in illegal activity. And it quotes the council opinion, which I believe was published, and that's the one relating to Gaza in Palestine, dated November 24. At that point, I should see if any of the committee would like to add any of their own thoughts to that as a committee response. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure, because we are due to debate the motion later in the meeting.
Correct.
Is that going to be public or the debate?
The plan that I outlined and I emailed to people, including the pension manager, was that we will discuss the confidential papers in closed session. That includes the recent Casey advice and the briefing paper from officers that refers to it. But we will then return to public session to debate non-confidential items and to decide upon the motion. But I think here we're related specifically to the public question.
Yeah.
So at this point, all I seek is if you have anything else you'd like to add in response to the public question.
I don't think so, because I'm not allowed. I'm not sure what we're allowed to say at this point about about that. So it's difficult. People want answers, and I want to give them answers, but it feels like we're not able to do so.
Right. Shall I use my prerogative and suggest that you start to say what you want, and if the pension fund manager who's sitting opposite you believes that you're treading onto any dangerous ground at all, he'll say something. Is that okay?
It's
Good.
not much that I have a formulated idea yet, but it's just the fact we haven't debated it today yet, and also we kind of have discussed a route forward. Obviously, we're going to debate that route forward. I just want to make sure that the public understand why that might be our route forward. Seems sort of complicated at this point.
I think we'll thank you for your contribution, and we'll see how the debate progresses later on. The third question then is public question 58. This is from Barry Jonathan Black. Is Barry with us today? So Barry, would you like to read out your question, or would you prefer me to read it out for you? Happy to do so. But thank you for sending it in. Question is, while reviewing and or amending its policies regarding responsible investments in respect of environmental, social and governance, and or its investment strategy statement, has the Isle of Wight Local Government Pension Scheme Committee ever, in their decision-making, given precedence to or been swayed by any other outside non-legally binding influenced opinion, such as IHRA, over the UK membership of and obligations to the International Criminal Court of Justice, advice and rulings? So I did try to introduce pauses there where you've put commas, Barry. Hopefully that was read out accurately enough. And the response is no. The Isle of Wight Pension Fund Committee is committed to reviewing its investment strategy statement as part of developing and enhancing its ESG policy. Sorry, as part of developing and enhancing its ESG policy. This is to ensure it reflects the primacy of the fiduciary duty it has to its members, but also ensuring the fund has a role in shaping and influencing company actions in relation to human rights. The fund has a long-standing commitment to stewardship and active ownership. This is reflected in the fund's investment strategy statement that includes the statement that the fund believes that its influence as a shareholder is better deployed by engaging with companies in order to influence behaviour and enhance shareholder value. Our policy further states there is an increasing expectation on companies to ensure that they protect human rights in line with international, legal and regulatory obligations on a global scale, both directly and within their supply chains. The fund recognises that it has an obligation to respect human rights as outlined within the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and to encourage good practice which protects against violation and exploitation. This extends to expecting compliance with normative standards and relevant legislation. So I think that's very clear. It also has a feature in our investment strategy statement that we consider companies with a clear, responsible investment policy are expected to outperform companies without a reasonable investment policy over the long term. The Isle of Wight Pension Fund Committee belongs to an investment pool alongside other local authority pension funds, which adheres to the approach of believing in making long-term sustainable investments whilst integrating ESG risk considerations into the investment process and promoting good governance and stewardship for themselves and their investments. So Those are the three we've got. I now have to turn and ask if there are any other questions from the public, or if Barry would like a supplementary question. Thank you, Barry. Are there any other? Yes, it's a public chance. We have time. Please go ahead. Thank you for that. No need to apologize at all. We welcome questions. That is an intensely legal question. I'm going to invite our legal representative, Mr. Fernandez, to see if he would like to address that, or if not, that he will provide a written answer to that question within, let's say, 7 days. Are you there, Francis?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't hear the question in its entirety, but what I suggest is if it's a highly legalistic question, which it appears to be, then I think a more considered response would probably be the better option. So I will more than happily provide a written response when I have the transcript of the question within 7 days. Thank you, Chair.
Did you hear that? So good. So Mr. Fernandez, given that the question was to the committee, Mr. Fernandez will draft a reply. Then the committee will take a look at that, and you will get it very shortly. Pleasure. Steve wanted to say something.
Can I just comment on a couple of the responses? It's absolutely right that engagement has always been the preferred option recommended by the investment advisors on many occasions over various topics. But we do have in our limited ESG policy that says ultimately the fund does reserve the right to divest either from individual companies or sectors if all other channels fail. And clearly that is a sort of subjective governance judgment as to when that occurs. But I would suggest that 2 years on, 60,000 people now being killed in Gaza, I would question how is that engagement going?
Is there anything you wanted to add to that? I'm assuming not at this moment. No. Answer. Thank you, Steve, for that. Mark. So yeah, yes, it has been received. I have to say the advice is a little bit broader than you just outlined, Mark. It covers the genocide in Gaza and Palestine. It covers the illegal occupation of Palestinian lands, and it also covers the violation of international humanitarian and other issues. So it seems to have three components to it. It is a fairly substantial document. I've received a copy. I know the council has received a copy. I'm looking to my colleagues to see if they got one.
I got mine last night.
Yeah, so we've all just probably within the same or similar period to yourself received the same document. It is, as I say, quite a lengthy document. And it will take a little bit of time for us to go through and digest that. But I'm very confident that we will find a way to publish a response to that, either individually or collectively within the local government pension schemes. Difficult for me to judge because we haven't written it yet or even seen it. But I would assume that the response would be something that could be reviewed by a future meeting of this committee, and would probably be the subject of further engagement, I would imagine, in terms of public questions as a result of it, Mark. Yes, thank you. Steve, you want to add something?
Scheme Advisory Board, which is on national level, operates to provide advice and guidance to all pension funds, is aware that all funds receive this correspondence and issued a statement on Friday, so fairly recently, saying it's considering the matter and may seek further legal advice, but also write to the relevant government minister, Minister for Local Government, has quite a lot of the issues in it, and it is a very lengthy document. Seem to relate to sort of points of international law, so there's a fair chunk of it should relate to the central government. I'm not saying there's not points relevant to us as well, but they're taking the view that some of it should be government level response, and then we just wait to hear from further updates that they give when they did it.
Can I just check on it? Is there concurrent recommendation with the passing of it to government? Individual local authorities do not, in the intervening period, respond individually.
I think the correspondence does say we would like a response within 21 days, but the statement by the National Board says it's more important to take the necessary time to consider the arguments raised. So the board has a long-established role in assisting funds, and we will aim to do so again. So it seems sensible to wait for we get some national guidance.
So do you know if they've actually done that? Have they now written to the minister? And okay, I was just trying to work out where we were on the clock. That was all.
I don't know. To be honest, all I know is the statement they put out, which I think we have circulated to members.
It was an intense day of documents yesterday. Right, thank you for that. And thank you for the question, Mark. Are there any other public questions? No. Proceeding onwards then, item 6 on the agenda, which is the draft statement of accounts. Steve.
Thank you. So the statement of accounts for the pension fund form one part of the overall authority's statement of accounts. The council's accounts are part. They are currently under audit, the statement as it relates to the fund. We're getting towards the end of that audit. Identified a number of changes, so we're just discussing those with the auditors to make sure that we're agreed on the changes required. Should highlight the fact that they published a little late. The deadline is the 30th of June for statute. We delivered them about the middle of July, and the reasons for that delay were essentially there's a lot of knowledge. Left the authority last year with 2 key people leaving, and by the time an interim starting, there's already a backlog of work, working for lots and working papers. It takes a bit longer than sitting alongside and learning direct. So there was, I suppose, you know, hopefully an understandable delay in producing the accounts this time around. But going forward, we now have a permanent full-time accountant in post who is working alongside the interim accountant we got. So hopefully that'll improve the process going forward. In terms of the statement of accounts, I'd just highlight 2 or 3 key facts. The assets of the fund now exceed 800 million. Got almost 19,000 members in the fund, so that's active members, retired members, deferred members. And we've got 33 employers as well. And last year we paid out 30 million in benefits. So I think the accounts, as I say, are getting towards a state where they're finalising the auditors. They'll eventually go to the Audit and Governance Commission. I think the Audit and Governance Committee be agreed because they are part of the council's accounts. And just to highlight something I should have corrected in the recommendations, I think the first recommendation asks the committee to agree to the annual report and accounts. This is just the accounts at the moment. The annual report follow, so they're part of one document, as it were, but because the accounts are an important part, we've committed to the draft form now. So you've got
Thank you, Steve. I've just got one quick question of my own, and then I'll pass around to the committee to do. I noticed that the Isle of Wight Council fees being charged to the Isle of Wight Council Pension Fund, sometimes a matter of contention, have increased by 7% from £576,000 to £616,000 without any explanation of why that change has been made. Is there any information you can share on that?
with the finance director and back she's back from.
Could I suggest, as we did it last time as a committee, that we ask for a breakdown of those charges? We did do it last time and we didn't get it. I'm sure we would like to see a breakdown of small item of £616,000 being charged against the fund. And I suspect that should be a sort of standing request as well. We have such a large sum, don't just see it as a line item buried, that's unkind, but disclosed on page 40 of 42 of appendix to section 6 of the document. Luckily I went through it quite carefully and found it eventually, but it's, you know, it's quite an important figure. Thank you, Steve. I'll turn to the rest of the committee and see if they have any questions on Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions on the headline page, actually, on Appendix 1. The management expenses have gone up 20%. Is there a reason for that? Is it something to do with the increased amount paid out to members? Page 25.
Just to assist here, there is a breakdown further in the document of the 8.7 million of fees, sorry, of management expenses which are charged. I'll leave it to Steve to answer more on this. It is, and it's worth noting now while you're looking for that, it is again regrettable that we don't have the Chief Finance Officer or the Deputy Chief Finance Officer with us today to answer these questions. We have raised this point in the past, and not as though this committee has been scheduled at very short notice, been known for some time, and there is inherently within the pack that we have today a great deal of financial information, which I'm sure most of my questions are on, which is challenging. That's an observation, by the way.
Yeah, I think looking at the note that relates to that, the bulk of the expenses are investment management. So payments we're making to the I'd have to have a look at the terms we're making there, but I could speculate that maybe if we've had good performance, a bit more. And it's the net figure, of course, that's important. If people are performing well, pay them more, but our assets are growing as well. So, but I'd need to dig into the detail just to explain that. That's my kind of best guess. Bulk of it does relate to investment management expenses. We've recently slightly realigned our investment strategy as well. That might have incurred some additional charges being in some new investment managers, Pam.
We'll await you coming back to us with the detail on that. Maybe we can incorporate that within the minutes so that it's known. And again, it's back to that table numbered 12 on page 39 and the breakdown afterwards. Thank you. Councillor Blake again.
Questions on the taxation. We have no figure for taxation this year. Is that because we're waiting until January for that figure to be made up?
Which page?
Well, either on page 25 as and again it's repeated with no explanation, or in page 40. Last year we had £3 million worth of £3,000 of taxation, but none outlined for last financial year.
I suspect it's probably zero. It's just a blank zero rather than zero.
Yeah, okay.
So we've added that question to Steve's list. Thank you. Other questions from the committee? No? If I call your attention then to the recommendations, which are on page 21, we have the pension manager already corrected the word annual. Is that right? So the word annual needs to come out.
Annual report will be submitted, but the statement of accounts are a part.
Statement of accounts, rather than the draft annual report. Okay. Change that to statement of accounts for the year. And then that's the recommendation, which is labelled 5. Recommendation labelled 6 has a phrase in it which we changed, if you remember, on previous recommendations. Whereas it says delegates authority to the strategic management pensions in consultation with the chair of the pension fund committee, and previously we've changed that to in agreement with, so that it has to be with the agreement of the chair of the pension committee as well as just consultation. So I'm going to propose that we change that again this time to with. And I suppose I should look for call that an amendment to the proposal, this to a motion, because it's something we're being asked to decide. See if there's a seconder for that. Councillor Drew, is everybody happy with those two changes? Yes.
I'm still not happy about the over £500,000 we pay to the Isle of Wight Council, because the pension fund, staff employed by the pension fund are paid out of the pension fund. I would like to know where £500,000, which comes out of the pension fund, how is that split up? I would like an explanation. I'm not happy about that.
So we've asked for a breakdown of the 616,000. It's very difficult for us to prejudge any queries on that until we see the breakdown. So hopefully it will come quickly. So we've got those two changes, one relating to with agreement and the other relating to statement of accounts. Are we content to approve 6 and 7 on that basis? Everybody in favour of that, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I think that concludes item 6 and the appendix to it. We then come on to item 7, which is the internal audit update, starting in your packet, page 67. Not a very large section, but I imagine Elizabeth is, there she is, she's popped up online, is here to address us on this one. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Good morning, all. Good morning, Chair. Yes, the papers that you have in front of you are actually pretty short papers. However, it is painting the picture in relation to internal audit requirements in relation to the pension fund. You'll be aware that there are code of practice in place which were effective from March of last year. It's not a legal requirement, but it is very good and sound practice. We've had various conversations with senior officers on the pension side of the equation, and I'm bringing forward to you a proposal for the internal audit team who currently perform all of the work on the authority side of the equation to extend that within the pension side. And there is a proposed number of 4 audits for you to consider: A, whether you wish us to undertake the work, and B, whether you would then formally approve the annual plan for 25-26. Chair, beyond that, I think the papers, whilst they are short, probably cover the most salient elements, but I am happy to have any conversation or answer any questions that you may have collectively as a committee.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Just jumping in quickly with the question, do you believe that the proposed changes regarding pooling and also the changes regarding the nature of that pooling investment being a shareholding potentially would have any bearing on internal audit?
Chair, there are boundaries for internal audit, so we will not get involved in policy setting. If there are national indications and requirements, again, we do not get involved. Whilst we will support the council and pension fund in any way possible, it is not for the internal audit team to review. Our scope and our skills would still be within the boundaries in relation to the control environment that is in operation for the administration of the pension fund, not where it is specifically placing its funds. There are other parties to which provide assurance levels to a degree for that side of the equation. So our role would be quite restricted.
And just to add to Councillor Churchman's earlier remark, would the internal audit procedures that you follow include auditing the charges by the Isle of Wight Council against the pension fund?
Yes, we could actually have a look at those. We are proposing as one of the reviews that we look at the resourcing to see whether there is adequate resource to support the administration of the pension fund, but also look at charging in both directions against the pension fund and obviously the other way. And that is number 2 in the audit plan. So yes, we could cover those types of activities.
Thank you. So, questions from the committee? Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If I could ask a supplementary to that, obviously you are looking at the purely internal charges to the pension fund, but also we have external, internal charges, if you see what I mean, in terms of Hyman's doing a lot of our admin, you'd be looking into the value for money aspects of that, because the rates, whilst Hyman's deserve a lot of pay in terms of investment advice, when they're giving us admin advice, I believe it is at a very high rate, and something we should be keeping a close eye on, because that's a big cost to us. And I think we do look at the value for money we're getting at.
Value for money would be considered in all aspects. So yes, that again is an area. It would be akin to reviewing procurement activities on the main authority side of the equation. So that is within our remit.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Elizabeth, for the answer. We don't have an independent procurement element within the pension fund, so we are reliant on the administrating authority to provide the procurement exercise. And I would imagine, therefore, correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, that the value for money test would be against the authority, them being the one exercising the procurement process.
It would, but they also have a duty within their activities, irrespective of whether it is pension fund related, to make certain that value for money is obtained in all areas. But yes, you're right.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? No? So we have a recommendation here, which is that the 25-26 pension fund internal audit plan be approved. I'll move that and look for a seconder of that. Councillor Blake, thank you. Everybody in favour of that? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Elizabeth. We now come on to item 8 on the agenda, which is page 75 in your pack, which is the business plan update.
The business plan was agreed at the committee meeting at the end of July. So this essentially provides an update, and by having a business plan, hopefully allows us to track our progress on some things and to update the committee and for you to be fully informed of our activities. So you've got a series of appendices that try to give that detail. First appendices is the business plan activities over the year. Second appendices is a risk register. Third appendices is a breach log, although I think that's
exempt.
So that as an exempt item. The legislation tracker is item 4, and there's a training plan in item 5. We do not yet have a budget for the fund to work to, but that's something that we are working on with colleagues and hope to have that in place. So that's a work in progress, certainly by next year. There are so Appendix 1, I think that just highlight the activities that currently working on. Not surprisingly, the main one will be the pooling work. The nature of the pooling means a lot of the work now will be done fund level rather than pool level, so that will push more work in our direction, as it were. Just on the admin side as well, I should highlight that the pension fund's annual benefit statements telling members how much benefit they've accrued were issued at the end of August, which was by the due deadline. That was well done to the admin team on that one. The admin team are under a lot of pressure, I think, at the minute, because there are a number of projects as well on the go, as well as the business as usual aspect. So the team does need some support. That I think later, well, and cloud work that was the subject of a report committee, of course, this time around too. We do intend to bring a fuller, detailed admin next committee, so there's further oversight of the admin functions. Pension fund. On the risk register, increased risks. Highlights, just to pull out a few of them. Risk 24 around non-compliance. I think we're looking at just making sure what the fund does compared to what employers should do, that we have a sort of clear delineation there, and there's some activities that the fund does that probably should be done by the council. So we've got to have some project work on the go to realign the work to make sure the council as an employer is doing what it should do rather than the fund doing it for them. risk 26 on internal controls, because we've lost significant knowledge over the last year. Just mindful there's some risk that internal controls might not operate to the full extent. So that's an area we're having a look at. I'd also highlight 3 new risks, 2 of which are essentially about process and governance, one of which I already mentioned, ensure we have a budget going forward, and another to ensure that there's always information on a timely basis, full and complete information available, and considering significant issues at the committee. And I'd also highlight that we're aware there's been some vacancies, both at committee and board level, that we need to recruit to. So we'll be doing some work to full and make sure we have a full complement of people at the pension board. I've got 1 or 2 things I want to say on the breaches log, but circle for that as part 2 discussion. Yeah. Fine, thank you. Not much to say on the legislation tracker, I don't believe. We're waiting for the pension bill currently going through Parliament and the detail around that to be firmed up on. On training, I just again highlight the importance going forward, and our status as an investor as well. It's an important aspect to make sure we tick the box on the training. If you need to be of a certain level to have all the full range of investment products open to you. So it will be definitely in our interest to maintain that going forward. And I'd also highlight, and this will be something we'll bring to the committee probably in November, there's a couple of authorities, or a couple of employers, should I say, that are looking at leaving the fund. Some calculations are being done around their deficit or surplus, and they're likely to be significant amounts, and therefore will, in accordance with the policy previously agreed by the committee, will be to you probably next time around.
Thanks, Steve. In addition to the ones which are the housing people looking to depart, we've also had in the recent months the conclusion, I think, of the ones joining, have we? The academies, etc.
Are you referring to Casbrick and Medina? Yes, I believe they're into the fund.
Thank you. So you're right. I mean, the question, your input on Appendix 3 has to be dealt with separately. And given that that's one of the components of the recommendations, I think we're probably better waiting to deal with all the recommendations until we've heard your update on Appendix 3 as well. Otherwise, we'd be jumping the gun a bit, wouldn't we? The one thing I would note, and I'll invite the committee to address you on anything else they've got as well, is if we're looking at the relative roles of the committee and Isle of Wight Council as an employer, it would be important to separate the roles of administrating authority for the pension fund, which Isle of Wight Council would have, and their role as an employer, such that the responsibilities of an employer would be true to all employers, not only to Isle of Wight Council. And that separation of roles, I think, would be very beneficial. We would then have a paper talking about the responsibilities of employers, which could be circulated to all of the current 33 employers who are members of the scheme. Would that be a good way forward?
Yep, that sounds eminently sensible. Absolutely, we could help as part of our work that's ongoing, trying to make sure that lines that are a bit blurred, if we could put it that way, that we're clear on who, what, and we've got plans if the pension fund is picking up stuff that others should be doing, got plans to move, not overnight, because in due course, as it were, plans should enable us to make sure the fund just does what the to be doing.
It avoids conflating the role of administrating authority and employer, and it ensures that the responsibilities of Isle of Wight Council as an employer are the same as with the other employers.
I could just add to that. The admin strategy is due for review in March. So the admin strategy sets out the of the fund and employers. I think it's very timely. I believe it is, when it's due to be reviewed and obviously Richard on board. I think when that comes forward by March, actually it will do quite a bit for set out, because it's sitting out there and I think it's beefing it up, setting it out more clearly and explaining what's set out, laid out in that strategy statement. That, yeah, so I think. And I should say that there are charging mechanisms in there that we haven't yet. But for example, if people had information, you have a mechanism. That I think we've talked about with the board. Realise we're on a journey. Have the document we now need.
Thank you. So I'll turn to the committee and see if they've got any questions on this, and then I'm going to turn to Martin from the board, because we mentioned the board 3 times now, and it's only fair to give them an opportunity, not only on, you know, open places on the board, but in terms of their role in this as well. So questions from the committee. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, as a relatively new member, apologies if I should know this and I don't quite know this yet, but when we talk about the employer exits, it says process to potentially exit. The subsequent report, is that going to detail the reasons why, and will that potential exit have concluded by that time? I'm just sort of looking for more information around that.
I think one of the employers, their last active employers already left, so they're more in the will exit column. I think there's also the other employers is just going through a process, so there's nothing certain about that yet. So see on that one, but they're likely to be significant sums if it comes to pass, and so under the policy, I think there was a cut-off around it. If there's if we're talking about $500,000, then it will be reported to the committee. So it all has to be calculated, and there's all the caveats about, you know, when the figures may change yet, but it looks significant, and therefore we'll bring it to committee. That's how it's looking at the moment.
There's often, when we discuss potential levers, whether it's an individual or others, that there is an inquiry. They then request a valuation. Valuation gets done, and they may, depending on that valuation at any particular point in time, may decide to enact something or not enact it. So it's an inquiry, but as you heard, at least one of those seems to be very firm. Any other questions, committee? No? I'll turn to Martin, who's had a few seconds to think about things and see if there's something he'd like to contribute.
Only that there is a lot to get done before the 31st of March 2026, 1st of April, things like appointing a senior LGPS officer for the fund in a formal manner. Obviously the pooling's going ahead, but there's the kind of on the governance side an appointment of a new member to the committee to advise the committee, and as Louisa was mentioning, the policies that we need to get in place when we get the new pension schemes bill. Like we'll have to check on the administration policy, training policy, conflict of interest policy. So lots on the governance side in a very short period of time when the pooling's a lot of work's gonna be done on that. So I suppose from a board point of view, it's bandwidth, isn't it? We've got all these things separate work lines happening at the same time, and as Steve was saying, it's about resourcing and the focus to get all that done by the 1st of April. So very challenging few months ahead.
Given we've still got some input to receive on this, which is in reserve session part 2, I'm going to defer dealing with the recommendations here until we're in that. We've had that secondary advice. We do after the business plan update, also have a presentation to receive from somebody who's joining us online. Do we know what time Richard's coming in? Is he joining?
From Central, I think he's scheduled for 11:30.
11:30. Okay, so we're in good time for that.
Oh.
I was only told he had to go by 12. I didn't get the arrival time. Right. Thank you for that. Councillor Churchman.
It's a comment, not a question. Where on earth are we all going to find the time to do all of this? As a councillor, we are a small council, 39, and I would say that we're stretched already. I know that I have spent a colossal amount of time on the pension stuff. I'm told now I have to virtually become a fund manager. Even fund managers tell me that the markets have grown so much with additional stuff that even they do not get involved or understand everything. And yet, as a mere councillor, I'm expected to not make decisions. That is why we have obviously officers, which is why we have presentations from the different people like Goldman Sachs. And yet somehow it almost seems to be expected that I've got to get to the level of an investment manager working for Goldman Sachs. And quite frankly, it's an impossibility. It will also deter people from joining the pension fund committee because, as I said, a small council, we're very busy. Does anybody know how other pension committees work on the mainland? Do we possibly, as I said, I just have this really real problem that we just sometimes cannot keep up.
Yeah, I think Louisa set out a training plan that you've got there. I think it's, and under requirements for the board, in a certain level of knowledge, understanding. You are not expected to be an absolute expert on every subject. The committee works collectively to make decisions. You've got support officers and advisors. You have training from fund managers as well. So I think there's part of the way of addressing this, and other funds do, is having that collective degree of knowledge. One thing that I think Louisa kind of highlighted earlier about the ability to access different types of investments. I think Steve, sorry. So there's the MiFID II requirement in terms of classing you as a retail or a professional investor. You currently opt up to professional status. So there is a kind of level of knowledge and understanding you need to maintain, but that is kind of collectively with the support of officers and advisors to be able to achieve that as well. If you fail to maintain that, there's a potential that effectively it restricts the investments that you can access, or it needs to be very careful in terms of the way in which you receive communications and information on those investments. So I think most do it in terms of that kind of collective arrangement. There's also lots of different options for training. So it's not everyone has to do the same thing. It's having those resources available. So things like the Lola online learning academy, and there's different views on how complex or simple some of that is, but we try to have that kind of bite-sized pieces, so at least there's a kind of base level of knowledge. So I think it's working collectively as a committee, finding opportunities. Clearly we've got a session after today's meeting, which is another way of kind of tacking it on to the end of a committee meeting. It allows that kind of easy access to sessions as well. So there are a variety of ways, but it is undoubtedly a challenge. There's always something new in investments. Clearly there will be a change next year with the Fit for the Future bill, and once the next evolution of pooling comes in, because it will shift that focus in terms of what your responsibilities are as a committee. So it might mean you don't need to have as detailed knowledge on the individual managers, but you will have to seek kind of additional input from an independent advisor on that, and potentially advice on the kind of oversight of your pool. So that might actually help in terms of the responsibilities that you have, and the level of knowledge and understanding that's expected as well when we see that shift of some of the fiduciary duties, the Fit for the Future.
So I think that it's clear that we need to work collectively as a committee. we're not fully resourced as a committee at the moment. Neither is the board, I understand. So we do need to try and address that. And that is important as we come into the additional training as well, so that we're all trained at the same time, rather than having anyone who joins late and is delayed in that process. So before I carry on with questions, I think just to pick up on that point, perhaps I could pass it to Francis if you're still with us. We are with vacancies on the board at the moment, which leaves us outside of political proportionality. I have written to the leader of the group where we are not politically proportionate to see if there was any opportunity to obtain a replacement. Nothing has been brought forward. What opportunity is there for us to resource the committee outside of that proportionality calculation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I've just got my camera on, it should come on in a second. I think the thing about proportionality is that proportionality is a legal requirement, and the committee needs to be composed of proportional represented groups. Now, what the council could do, should the council wish, is they could decide not to have a proportional council committee, for example, but all councillors would need to agree, because the way the legislation works is that if you're going outside the proportionality process, then you can't have one person objecting to it, one councillor objecting to it. So it's quite hard to get to a position where the committee is agreed to be non-proportional, but it is within the gift of council to decide that's the case. But we'd have to take a report to full council and agree that the committee wasn't proportional, and every councillor, well, you couldn't have any dissent from any one councillor. Yeah. So what we are doing, Chair, is we are doing a proportionality report to the next full council. So this is something we can explore if, with the group leaders, if that's what you'd want us to do. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I would, for one, because I think it's important that the committee is fully resourced, and we do struggle. There are other people who have expressed an interest in the pension committee, surprisingly, but there are, and but they are not from the group who is proportionally unrepresented, and therefore to entertain them joining would amplify the disproportionality that we already have. But I would strongly urge you to include in that paper, please. And I'll look to the other committee to see if they've got any comments on this. On that specific point first, yeah.
Just a very quick comment. My belief was that if a position wasn't taken up within 3 months, then it became an open place for another councillor to be nominated to. I don't know whether Councillor Jordan's brief stint on the committee without actually attending a meeting, whether that resets the clock on that 3 months. But if they have a little bit of clarity around that part of the constitution, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just, in terms of that 3-month rule, I'm not aware of the constitutional provision that can override the legislation on that. Yeah, because I think the issue there is that the legislation talks about proportional committees, where proportionality applies to those committees. So my view would be that the committee would need to be proportional. I know it's unhelpful if you have a vacancy. I know, I can understand that, and there might be a discussion to be had. But what I can do, I mean, clearly if there's a vacancy and the committee needs to fill that vacancy to make the committee more effective, then that's clearly a point of importance. So what I can do, Chair, is that we are shortly going to have discussion with group leaders as part of our normal process when we're doing proportionality reports, which, you know, have risen from, say, for example, the recent by-election resignation. We will have a discussion with group leaders, and this is something I'll put on the agenda. But I think the one caveat I would make is that if one councillor stands up and says they object, then we can't have a non-proportional council and committees. But that's something I'll put on the agenda, definitely. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Blake.
Very quick supplementary. My understanding is that one of the groups has a substitute named, but a vacancy as well. How does that stand in terms of representation? To me, that sounds like you managing to avoid non-attendance by the fact you're down as a substitute to a vacant position.
If you're not comfortable answering that, which seems to be quite a technical question now, Francis, I'm happy for you to come back to us afterwards, because I didn't want to spend too much time on this, and it probably does need some thinking about.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, that's a point I'll take away, and certainly I'll be prepared for a proper discussion in the group leader meeting when we meet to discuss proportionality. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions on this point? I think Councillor Stewart had his hand up at one point. He was the next one, and then I'll come to Councillor Lever. And then
my question was relating to the discussion we're having about training, so I'll come back to that.
All right, so we'll come back to that. So, when you're considering this issue of proportionality and nominees, membership, disproportionality of the committee, and substitutes area, I'll collectively put all those together. Could I just ask that you also include in that consideration of the availability of papers to substitutes, because there's nowhere else to raise it, and that has come up recently, so that last minute or even short notice substitutes cannot be effective on the committee if they've not previously been able to read the paperwork of the committee. And we did recently have a prospective substitute today, which I won't go into, but the request for them to be able to have access to the papers was rejected on the basis that the papers had confidential material in them. So clearly, if we don't share all the papers for a committee meeting in good time, it effectively makes substitution impossible. But I'll leave that to add to you. And I think at that point, we'll leave your work list and return to the discussion we were having.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my questions are all tied into that point and the point around training. So is obviously risk 6 mentions around knowledge and expertise potentially impacting the investment range open to the fund. Does being a member down, does that classify as that as well? So not having a member of the committee, does that contribute to that? Should similarly to, because I believe planning operates in this way, where substitutes have to have a certain level of planning training. So should substitutes to pensions also need to be going through the training that we're expected to go through? And in terms of the training, it's not incredibly clear to me just yet, but is the clarity around what level of training leads to what funds are available? I'm not saying that as a means to make sure that councillors are doing the bare minimum, but it'd just be easier to understand the impacts of certain levels of trainings might have on the funds available to us. Sorry, there's a lot there.
Chair, I can assist with part of the answer to that, if that's helpful.
Go ahead, Francis.
Yeah, yes, it's a very good question, very good question. I think the thing is, when a substitute is sitting on a committee, then they're no longer a substitute in that sense. They are a member of the committee, and they're making a decision on behalf of the committee. So any decision that the committee makes needs to be lawful, etc. So my simple answer to that would be that substitutes would need to have the same level of training as the main committee if they're going to be sitting on a committee. So not having that level of training will be risky in terms of decision making. In terms of what training, I think my colleague Ms. Harrison will probably be able to assist in terms of what's been defined as the training. Thank you, Chair.
So just to turn that answer around a little bit, Francis, would it necessarily follow that one could not be a substitute? I'm picking up on Councillor Lever's point here. Would it necessarily be true that somebody could not be a substitute if they had not had the requisite training?
Yeah, I think
which is the case on the planning, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, because I'm a bit blind to what training is actually put in place, but if you have a situation where a substitute is sitting on a committee and they're not trained to the level required for them to make a decision, because they are decision makers on that committee, even though they're a substitute replacing someone, then that is a risk. So the issue there is that we would need to involve them in the training. So substitutes would, by agreeing to be a substitute, would need to agree to do the training, and we need to have to deliver it to them. It's the same principle for a planning committee, which is quasi-judicial. And in the planning committees, probably not, I mean, in the pensions committee, it's just as important, if not more important, because of the regulatory nature of the work you're doing. So this is something definitely that we need to consider if we're not doing it.
Thank you. I think Steve Harrison wanted to jump in as part of the answer, and then I'll come to Councillor Blake.
It is something I've been looking at, and I was asking colleagues in the access authorities, so the 10 other authorities around the southeast, and one other authority did say they had a similar system of substitutes, but they were clear that there was a certain level of kind of minimum training that people had to do to be a substitute before they could then become on the committee. So we've not done anything with that information yet. We've just been kind of seeking how others operate and having to think about it. But just for that example, before they're accepted as a substitute and attending committee, there is a sort of basic training level that they require.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates back to what Mr. Walker was saying earlier about the collective hoping to have the entirety of the knowledge rather than the individuals. However, obviously the training we're given is very much start here, finish here. And if we're all on the same journey, and I imagine we're all making relatively similar progress, we're all going to have relatively similar training under our belts. To that end, I mean, is there an ability to have a track record of where we all are as individuals, and then maybe then for the chair or something to see where deficiencies are within our collective knowledge, so that we can make sure that someone does a further part of the training further on from where we collectively are individually,
including substitutes.
Including substitutes.
Okay, well, I think we'll leave Steve to deal with that, because it seems to be something they've already got under consideration. And I'm sure Louisa can, dealing with the training and compliance issues, can ensure that we stay on the right side of that line that Francis outlined to us legally. I think the lesson here is not to forget substitutes, to be very careful when you have a quasi-regulatory body, whether it's pensions or planning, where there is a statutory responsibility, knowledge that the substitutes are equally trained. I think the next question was from Steve Milford.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just referring to page 114 in the training plan, I did attend the session on investment beliefs. I missed the end of it. That's a very useful session. Took us a bit forward. It didn't actually put us in a position where we could develop an ESG policy. Just note the action now is to update that investment beliefs sort of statement after March 26, and that's obviously over 6 months now. Is there the opportunity to have some more work done specifically on an ESG policy the next sort of few months? Because that's an area where clearly we're struggling because we haven't got much detail in such an ESG policy. And they are slightly different things. ESG policy and an investment beliefs statement. They're similar areas, but the latter is much more sort of general. if we had an ESG policy drawn up, debated and a bit more detail, then we could actually have something more concrete to base our future decisions on. I wonder whether we could actively pursue that as a piece of work, or just wait another 6 months plus to just refresh a very general statement on investment beliefs.
Thank you, Steve. So it is on the work plan. It is overdue at the moment, and we have that topic coming up within the debate on the motion as well later on. So I think it all feeds into the same debate. But a good point. Anything else on this section? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. One of the interesting things about some of the training is, of course, it's reasonably technical, but to a fairly simple level. But one of the issues which I'm not seeing really training is the risk analysis, because one of the key points for any of us is to understand the risks that we see and to be able to see those risks. So if there is any available training which might be put forward to allow members of the committee, including substitutes, and that is an important point, about how to understand risk, because some of us obviously have come across this before, and invariably, if you get caught up in the technical side of it, you start looking at the individual steps as opposed to what is the key factor, which is what is the risk behind that particular investment strategy or that particular type of approach or even investment asset. I think the major point we've got, of course, is that with the pooling activity going on at the moment, we are seeing a developing risk coming out of the level of liquidity within where we sit at the moment. And to be aware, and it was talked about last time, to be aware that obviously if liquidity is very low, then that is a risk in its own right. So, sorry, coming back to the point, if there is any available training on how to deal with the risk ratios and the appropriate risk that we would ask the professionals to explain to us, then that might be helpful.
Do you want to respond to that, Louisa?
No, I think that's a very sensible approach, and I think it's actually. Sorry. I think that's a very sensible approach and something that we consider all the time. And I think so. Absolutely, bring it through even more in training, and especially as we're in a heightened state at the moment, keep the eye on the ball and the risks all the time. So yes, and practice.
Barbara.
Yes, quite a few years ago, it might not be relevant now, but quite a few years ago when I ran the Register for Children's Services, there was training within the council, there was a course. I don't know if it's still available, but that might be something that you can get to see if that's in the learning section.
Thank you. I don't recall it coming up at all during the induction training of new members, but worth looking at. Okay, anything else on this one? Otherwise, we'll defer dealing with those recommendations to part 2. What I'll try and do, though, is I'll put us into closed session, and then we can have the advice that relates to this section on Appendix 3 and deal with that so that that's dealt with fully. Right. I now have to consider passing a resolution under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. The public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business, namely agenda items 10 to 15 on the grounds that there is likely to be a disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 of part 1 of schedule 12 of the Act. And in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. And to that point, my plan is that we will deal with specific exempt information and then later on return to open session to debate the points on the motion which are not restricted. So I'm looking for a seconder for that motion. Thank you, Vanessa. Everybody in favour of that? That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. So we have to ask you at this point, please, public and press, to